Welcome back, beautiful people. This is episode 71 of an Untold narrative, where we host creatives, entrepreneurs, brand builders, artists, photographers, and everything in between, and just try to tell their story and highlight people who are underground working on super cool things. And today's guest is no different. We have Jaclyn Rescigno. I think I said that correctly.
You did.
Who is joining us, who does a ton of behind the scenes work. She is a mother. She
Yes.
is a CEO sidekick, as she self-proclaims herself, and does a number of other things. Jackie, thanks for joining us. How
Thank
are
you
you?
for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Super cool. I'm stoked to have you. Obviously, we had a chance to work together a number of months ago. How do you give yourself a 30-second elevator pitch or maybe a minute long pitch? Like,
Okay, I know
what
this
is
one's
it?
tough.
What is it that how would you explain what you do?
Okay, so basically, I feel like my name kind of explains it all. So it's a CEO sidekick. So basically, anything that a CEO would need help with that they can't do on their own, that's what I do. 15 years of legal experience, MBA, mix the two together, and that's what I do.
Okay. And so that it sounds like you're kind of taking shots at CEOs, like they can't do certain things, right?
No, but I've worked with a lot of startups and it's super, crazy and busy. And there's a lot of things that maybe they're experienced in one area, but as a CEO, you need to be able to manage multiple areas. And there's certain sides of business that you might never have experienced before. So we come in and help you figure that out, whether it's getting your systems in place in order for you to hire specific experts, because a lot of the CEOs at the startups, they try to do it all themselves, and there comes a point where you want to scale, and you realize you can't do it alone. You need to hire talent. So we come in and we help you figure out what talent you need to hire, what's your next step, or you need a contract reviewed, we'll help you review that contract. You need legal systems or technology set up, we will help you with that. It kind of runs the gamut. We'll help you with your invoicing and your payment. We'll get you set up on QuickBooks. So we're kind of like the behind the scenes pulling the strings. We're usually like the person that comes in right in the beginning. We're not like when you're fully established. Like we're like the first person you usually hire. It's not really like an executive assistant because of the legal experience that we have. So it's kind of like a step above that. It's like a COO, a chief of operations.
Right. Super interesting, right? And that's why I was fascinated to have you on here, because it's such a different perspective in forms of like a creative output, because you're managing and pulling strings in so many different ways that nobody even knows exists.
Yes.
How did you get into something like this? So
Yeah.
we'll go back in time, but like you have your MBA, you said you
Yeah.
spoke to the legal side, but you're not a lawyer. So like, where did it all begin?
Yeah. So, I've always loved business. I was kind of like one of those people that watch, the Shark Tank and come up with like inventions, and always was like, felt like I was a little bit different. I always worked in legal with contract manager, paralegal roles, was trying to decide, should I go to law school? The recession hit. I was like, I'm not going to go to law school. So I was like, I'm going to get my MBA and I'm going to mix the legal with the business. And so I worked in house at a lot of companies, worked at the big law firms. One of them was New Balance Athletics. That's kind of how I've always played sports, loved New Balance, got into, the sports side of, the sneaker world, and the athletic side with the athletes and things like that. Love that side of it. But I always felt like, I wanted to go off on my own and do something more. So when the pandemic hit, I was working full time. I have two kids, like we mentioned, and I had a pay cut from my company because of COVID. So I started working at night, and I was realizing a lot of people were quitting their jobs and starting their own businesses, but they didn't really know exactly what they were doing. They were just going out there and doing it. And I made more money at night than I did during my full time job during the day. So I just quit my full time job and went all in on this. And it was like a big risk. Like I am pretty much type A, worked in legal. Like I don't really do stuff like that. So I did it. And ever since then, it's just been like nonstop. Like I got an office, we have an employee now, one employee, we're trying to hire another person. Got to work with lots of cool brands like a big, large fashion company, large restaurant company, small app creators, photographers, designers, and lots of law firms that are starting up. So it's kind of a mix.
Wow. That is amazing. We're gonna get into like your actual business, but I want to backtrack because you mentioned
Yeah.
like working for like corporate, right?
Yes.
And so a lot of people, myself included, spent a long time in corporate, and
Yeah.
then the pandemic enlightens you where an opportunity presents itself and you take a risk, right? Like,
Yeah.
but like working for New Balance from really the legal side, right? Like obviously they
Yeah.
have to deal with trademarks and patents and
Mhm.
contracts and partnerships and all that other stuff. Talk about like what was it that you were doing for them in-house?
Yeah.
And just like, because obviously a lot of the listenership here is sneakerheads and people who
Yeah.
are in footwear, but like there's so much behind the scenes that these companies have to do.
Yeah, New Balance was a large company at the time. I think it was 2014 when I worked there, and I was working for the legal department. We were small at that time, but it was super busy. Tons of contracts. We did, anything large marketing department. So we did lots of marketing agreements, lots of athlete agreements that we did, lots of influencer agreements, and I was kind of like a business liaison between the legal department and the business people. I actually sat outside of the legal department. So the business people would come to me, they would have a contract and they wouldn't understand it. They wouldn't really know how to read it because that wasn't their area of expertise. So I kind of would break it down, help them write SOWs, which are like statements of work on what exactly that they wanted to do and get it in the shape that it needed to be in to even be presented to an attorney, because these attorneys are so busy that you want to get your agreement in front of them. It's got to look good so that they can get it out. Like it was, it was like a chain there. So I did a ton of agreements, trademark and collaboration agreements. I also worked with intellectual property. They had an office in Lawrence, which was where all the designers were. Like that was the cool place to
That was a
go.
cool building.
Yeah, like everybody there was so cool. I was like the boring legal person. So I got to meet a lot of the designers. I did a ton of patent review. I learned how to read patents while I was there. I had never learned how to read a patent before, so those attorneys taught me. And a lot of the review I did was like reviewing other companies, making sure that we weren't infringing, keeping track of other companies' patents, what they were doing, and working with the designers to make sure that we weren't like infringing on anybody's patent. So we did like a whole range of stuff. That's really where I got my contract experience, which I think has helped me immensely in business, because having contract experience, I think even if you aren't in the legal field, if you're a CEO or head of a company, I feel like you should learn how to read a contract, because at some point you're going to have to talk to an attorney and you're going to want to know what you're talking about when you talk to this attorney. You don't
So
want to just throw it over the fence.
how, like, I think, I experienced this obviously recently. That's why I worked with you and Zach a little bit. And
Yeah.
um, when people, I think to like bring it down to like ground level for people to understand, right? Like the only time, like, let's just say if you're working in corporate and you're going from job to job, ideally you get presented a contract, a new contract. How much should people actually understand? I feel like everybody's lawyer is like their dad or like their family member.
Yes.
So like, are you
Yeah.
suggesting that people like actually like look into these things, like so they don't have like they're not like strapped to this company and some sort of agreement for 6 months after their
Oh
employment
yeah.
ends or anything like that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, obviously I work in legal and I'm, type A, so I would be like, yes, read every contract. But the good thing about what I do is lawyers sometimes are always saying no, and the business is always saying yes. I'm like that middle mediator person that can tell you what a contract says, but I can tell you what the lawyer is saying as far as your legal advice, but like we will manage the risk. What's the risk here if you decide to agree to this specific term? But I do see a ton, especially in your field with designers, intellectual property, who owns what happens if they don't like what you design, who, are you going to get paid, all of that stuff. I've seen so many. I guess a lot of people go to lawyers after the fact, and I would say learn contracts and be proactive about the things that you're getting yourself into before you have a problem. Because sometimes you get locked in, you can't work for competitors. You can't, you can't ask anybody to work with you for, like, it could be, sometimes I've seen years. It depends on certain states, like those clauses of whether you can work with competitors or not. But because in the sneaker field, people jump around, they,
Right.
they create their own designs. So it's really important to look at those things up front. But you do have to manage, the risk, and you can't just say no to everything. Sometimes you have to take a little bit of a risk.
Sure.
So it's a balance.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. And I think that's like, I was so happy, like, even like full transparency, like with my new employer, right? Like the startup that I work for, like I just like I was like, I don't know what any of this means. Like I need somebody else to look it over for me. So
Yeah.
thankfully I knew you and Zach, but like not everybody is in that position. So I think it is super important. And I think that does shed a lot of light on what people should be looking for. What was like what was like the positive of working for like a corporate legal department, and then what was the negative? And you could start with either with
Yeah.
the one you want.
So I loved New Balance. The people were amazing. They were so talented. It was so cool. Got tons of free sneakers, obviously. The swag was like, just that alone. They would have days where we could go in and just get free snag. And sometimes we'd get a little sneaker here or there if we did a contract a little faster. I'm not saying any names though, but yeah, it works though. Hey, if you give people sneakers and stuff, it works. But I would say it was super, super busy. The positive would be that I got to touch every type of contract. I got to work with really high up finance and tax people. I got experience with entity management and contracts and athlete agreements and negotiations. And they put me in that position to be able to do that because it was out of necessity. We had to because it was so busy.
Right.
I guess the other side is, the negative is like, I'm one of those people that want to grow, want to advance, want to make improvements and things. And there was a lot of things that we could make improvements with in some of these companies I worked at. But they just weren't ready, or they weren't willing to make changes based, like maybe stay in an old archaic system that wasn't working. So that I felt like I was being held back at certain points. So I've always felt like that working in corporate
So that, I
sometimes.
mean, that point happens across all fields, right? Like not
Yeah.
just legal, on like, the a design system or whatever, a development system can all be like archaic, or do you have any ideas on like, or suggestions on like, how do people change that, right? Like, did you bring ideas to the table and we're like, hey, if we did X, Y, and Z, like we could get
Yeah.
X, Y, and Z back? Like,
Yeah. I guess I don't really have any good advice for that because I always would present something and then I would leave. And then after I would leave, they'd be like, crap, we should have done that or something. You know what I mean? So they progress after I'm leaving. I'm kind of like that person that comes in and suggests things and then I leave. But I would say getting people to trust you and then making the right connections at places, like with the people that actually do have the influence to change those things, because I'm down here and there's people up here that actually have the influence. So you got to slowly get people to trust you, as how I've ever made slight little changes at large corporate companies.
yeah, I think that's super good advice. And so
Yeah.
you did eventually gravitate away from, as you spoke about, gravitate away from the corporate world, and
Yeah.
now you started your own business. And so you've been doing that now for almost 2 years, I
Yeah.
assume, based on the math of COVID. And what has been the biggest challenge for you in
Oh
terms of
my.
working for yourself?
Yeah, I don't, there's been so many. I mean, COVID alone was a challenge, just trying to navigate that with two kids doing Zoom preschool at home
Oh my
while I was
goodness.
running a business. Um, Everybody was so awesome though with that side of it. But uh, I would say managing relationships is actually uh was has been really, really hard. Like just making connections with people and not taking things too personally, because it's so crazy in the startup world. Everybody is so busy and gung-ho and go-getters. Like it's like you got a bunch of go-getters in one room together and we're all kind of on the same page, but at the same time it's like, it can be difficult at times because it can get really stressful and stuff. So managing those type of relationships, setting boundaries with people, saying no to certain things, not taking on too much. I mean, there's so many things that have been a challenge. And then scaling, I think, is also a challenge. Knowing when to scale, knowing when to hire, taking in work and sending work out. Like that's that weird gray area of like when you do that, I guess is,
So I think a lot of people struggle with that, right? Like individuals,
yeah,
like, there's a lot of freelance people that I know, like who work in, like, let's just say the design field. How do you, like, what is that threshold of like figuring out, you just hired, you now have a staff of one looking to grow to two, like,
yeah,
is that another risk that you just have to take and pray it works
yeah.
out?
Yeah, I would say, and I've heard this from other people and mentors that I talk to, like if you're thinking about that you need somebody, you got to just do it. So the
Mm.
person that I brought on, I actually trained for like a year before I actually gave them any client work. So it's like I didn't take on the client work until I knew she was ready. But that's just the way that I do it because I'm very particular about people that I hire and that I send out to my clients. But if you're thinking that you're ready, you're probably way past being ready.
I think that's super solid
Yeah.
advice.
And
That
you do take a little bit of a cut in your pay, and it does take some time to train. So it's like timing consuming, and it decreases your amount that revenue that you're making because you're sending it out, but it's worth it. So it's like you got to take a step back to move forward,
Well,
if that
that's in
makes
the
sense.
short term, right? Like long
Yes.
term, ideally, like they would be all set and they would run their
Yes.
own vertical, and then you would be able to focus on everything else. So,
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah. And what's been like the funnest thing about it, right? Like, I don't think, myself included, like it's easy to get bogged down in like entrepreneurialness and like startup
Yeah.
life and all this stuff. But like, what's been like the funnest part?
I think the connections that I have made just, I mean, you never know where they're going to come from. You never know what your day is going to bring. One day you might get a request, to do like a really boring agreement for somebody. And then the next day it could be like this huge celebrity. And you're like, how did we get that? Like, that is so cool. And you have this like connection to this celebrity that you're like, how did I do that with my own business? Like, it's that part of it of like the connections that I make in such weird ways that I never thought that I could make, especially being at home and not like in an office is so cool. And then I love watching these companies grow, like watching them expand and turn into something like really cool is like addictive to me. I can't, like, I get super involved in their companies. Yeah, I feel like they're like my babies almost.
I mean, part, especially if you're working with people who are just getting going, right? Then
Yeah,
you get to watch it grow a little bit.
yeah,
Um, I think it's how do you I think one of the biggest, what I've heard, challenges is like acquisition of clients or new people or relationships. Like, how are you kind of manage? Is it all like from past lives and careers that you're like
yeah.
onboarding people into your business, or like how are you finding people?
So, I when I quit my job, I kind of like had this like mindset of like, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm just going to do it. I'm not going to care what anybody thinks. So I just like reached out to companies that, may need my help, and they were like, yeah, and I was like, this is crazy. How is this happening? So the larger clients, I just reached out to them, like just cold reached out to them and sent my resume, sent my website. I was like, whatever, it doesn't, what am I going to lose here? And obviously Instagram. I recently redid my Instagram because I wasn't hitting the ideal client with my other Instagram. Once I changed it, now I have a new one. I'm hitting more ideal clients.
Hmm.
I go to conferences. So I just went to a conference, met a ton of people at the conference. Even just like a simple hashtag, I just connected to somebody that we're going to be doing business together because I put a hashtag on something and he found me on Instagram. So it does work. I do have a lot of clients that I met on Instagram. I actually, LinkedIn still works for
Yeah.
me. I do freelancing websites like Upwork. That still works for me. And friends of friends and old companies, they'll call back. They might have somebody that is going out or left the company and they need help. So they kind of outsource to us. So it comes from all over.
Yeah, I do want to talk about like the Instagram because like I don't
Yeah.
understand like I'm very fortunate. Fortunate it depends on what your perspective is. I don't have children. So like
Yes.
you have a business, you have children, you have a life,
Yeah.
and then you are pumping content all the time.
Yeah.
whether
Yeah.
it's whether it's on Instagram stories or like your reels or whatever, like how are you juggling all of that? Because I talk to so many freelancers where they're just like, yeah, I do all this cool shit. I don't know, like I don't have the time to make
Yeah.
videos or like
Yeah.
post 50
I
times a day.
I know. A lot of people ask me the question, like, how do you have twins who are 5 years old and do this and then run the house or whatever else you do? I'm just like one of those people that has always been on the go. I don't stop. Like I know sometimes people say, "Oh, that's not a good thing," but I sleep, I exercise, I do all those things I'm supposed to do. I get up at 5 a.m. That helps a lot, you know. And my kids, they go to school for 8 hours a day. That's
Right.
8 hours. But the other part of it is during COVID, I learned how to do more in less amount of time. So it's like maybe I'll pump out some content. I have a meeting with you for an hour. My kids are at school. I got 8 hours. What am I going to do? I don't kind of dilly dally. I work and then at the end of the day, I'm done. Or if I'll have a call at night sometimes. I use my time wisely and I also follow like the 80-20 rule where I don't put 100% into anything. It's not 100% into Instagram. It's not 100% into my house. It's the 80-20. So it's like you try to make everything perfect. It's not going to work in my world.
Right. That's awesome. And so do you shut down like at night? Like are you able to like because a lot of people say like if you're doing your own business, like you got to work
Yeah.
around the clock. It sounds like you've
Yeah.
compartmentalized a lot of these sections of what you do.
Yeah, I there was a point where the boundaries sometimes in the beginning, and this might happen to a lot of people, you got to be careful not to cross those boundaries and like working at night. If a client needs me and I work in legal, sometimes you have to work at night when the kids go to bed. I don't intertwine anything to, conflict with my personal life. But I read, I work out, I enjoy my life, I run, I travel. So, I have a life too, but it does take a little while to find that balance sometimes.
Sure. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I'm trying to figure that out myself. But yeah, no, it's a lot. But it
Yeah,
sounds like you figured it out or trying to figure it out and it's working for you. What do you like you're a couple years in now.
yeah,
What do you want? Do you want to grow the company to a big kind of massive, business where you have 50, 100 employees, 1,000 employees? Like how big do
yeah.
you want to go?
I think we talked about this earlier, and I came to a point sometimes where I'm like, my father passed away recently, and I was kind of reevaluating what I was doing with my life and if I was content with what I have right now. And I am content, but it's like with my father passing away, it's like, why stop? Keep going, keep seeing where it goes. Like, why put a halt on things, So I went to this conference. I met amazing people that were doing the same things. And when you connect with people that are in the same boat with you, it like really helps. So I'm just gonna keep going. I'm gonna see where it goes. I have a new website coming out. I have a private login for clients. It's for startups and law firms where there's gonna be like templates and guides on how to run your business and things like that. That they can log into. So I'm not stopping anytime soon. Who knows where it's gonna go, I guess. We'll see.
But you don't like have like a 5-year plan, I assume. You're just like, I'm just gonna go take it day by day and just see what happens.
I guess I probably should have a 5 year plan, but kind of going with the flow. I guess this isn't really good advice for everybody, but going with the flow has worked for me with this. Just kind of like seeing where it goes. Because sometimes when I have that 5 year plan, it makes me like a little nervous, So I'm like, you know what? I don't want to think about that. I'm just gonna take it day by day.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I actually
Yeah.
think like the world moves too fast to have a multi-year plan because
Yeah.
it's gonna change. It's gonna
Yes.
it's gonna get turned upside down, like whether it's something in your family happens or
Yes.
something, business wise happens, you lose a client because of X, Y, and Z circumstance. Like so many
Yeah.
variables can happen that like if you're gonna spend the time to build something for 5 years out, I mean that's I don't
That's
I don't understand that.
exactly. That's exactly how I feel. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. I have a couple more questions for
Okay.
you. Number one, where can people find you? Where can people kind of look into your things, your
Okay.
website? What's your handles, or if you can follow you?
Okay. So I just got a new Instagram. It's at the and then underscore CEO Sidekick. And my website is www.theceosidekick.com. And that's under the construction. We should have it updated by November. We have a new site coming soon.
Oh, cool. Well, congrats on the new site. I know
Thank
it's
you.
always an overhaul and
Yes.
usually costly depending on who you use.
Yes, I waited 2 years. I did the site by myself, and I did all my pictures like by myself. The first, I had my babysitter take my pictures. So now that I'm 2 years in, I got a professional photographer. It's like, and then got a website. But you don't need to spend that right away. You can
Right.
wait.
Right. And then I've been asking a lot of people recently this question, and I've gotten a wildly different answer every single time, which has been amazing.
Okay.
Um, what do you want people to remember you by in terms of like if
Oh,
somebody said like one thing about you after you're gone, like what do you hope that people, take away from the impact that you've created?
that's a really good question. Oh man, that's a tough one, especially after my dad died. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. And I think about my dad a lot and like how the memories that I have of him there's a couple things, but I guess I am super loyal and super trustworthy, and I run my business that way as well. Like you can rely on us as a friend, as a daughter, as a business. We're gonna always be there for you, and we don't judge, and we run our business with like kindness, I guess. You know what I mean? We really care about you and your business. And we're not just like this outside consultant that comes in. Like we want to see you grow. And we're very close with our clients. Like we talk to their moms, like we know their kids, their moms have called me. So
That's awesome.
yeah. So hopefully I leave that legacy on people.
What I picked up on this, I was gonna say something earlier, but then
Yeah.
you kept saying it, so now I'm definitely gonna acknowledge it.
Okay.
Um, and I love this because
Okay.
I do it myself. You don't when you're speaking about your business, you're pretty much yourself. You say us and like
Yeah.
we instead of I, and I think not enough people do that because so many of us, whether you're in a meeting being like, I did this or I need to do this or I want this versus no, we need to go execute this or you can trust us.
Yes.
It's a different perspective, even though it's just you and one other person you just hired. You make it seem like it's so much bigger and more impactful and more of a team effort
Yeah.
than even though it is maybe an individualized effort, which is so incredible. I don't know if if you do that strategically or not, but more
No,
people
I
need to do
don't.
that.
I think it's maybe because I think of a team, as us being a part of your team too. And team in a business is super important to me. And I think it's super important to a lot of businesses to build your team with loyal, trustworthy people on top of talent. And it's really, really important to find that. So the people that I've had, I've mostly been able to keep because of those qualities, I think, or we've been mostly been able to keep because of those qualities. And my employee is a friend. She's trustworthy and loyal and kind also. And but she's tough too, because we've worked in legal. We're like tough chicks. So you know what I mean? We'll be trustworthy, but don't mess with us.
I love that.
I'm from Saugus. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, and we never really talked about it. You're from
Yeah.
Massachusetts, so we're not that far away,
Yes.
stone's throw. But Jackie, this has been incredible, so much fun.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on an Untold Narrative, episode 71. We're ticking through the 70s now. It's crazy.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. That was really fun.